Okay, guys, welcome back. Uh, so before I start, I just wanted to just issue one clarification, and I'll be posting the detailed solutions very soon. But what I just wanted to tell you is that there was one problem where there was a bit of a problem regarding the wording of the problem itself, right? So I have taken appropriate care of it, and I have given benefit of doubt to everyone. Okay, all right. So you don't need to worry. I mean, I probably the grades are already written to you because it was auto graded by Google, right? But don't worry, that's not your final grade because I have taken into account that the statement of that particular problem might be confusing, and I did not want to penalize any of you. Okay, all right. So I have taken appropriate care of it. All right. Uh, Also, there are like this Google Classroom or Google Forms do not allow fractional marks. So it's like 2.5 or so. The exam was conducted out of 18, and I have rescaled it to 15, 1.5, because the first quiz was 15% of the total, grade, right? So, okay. So let's begin then, right? Um, as I think if you recall, we said that um, there is this result that we are going to discuss in detail, right? Is that you already know that if there are two subspaces of a vector space, then the intersection of those two subspaces is also a subspace, right? Uh, can you tell me why? So U1, so let's right. I mean, it's sort of easy because I mean, if you take any two elements in U1 and U2. Like for example, I mean, I'm not going to show the whole thing, but let's say you take X and Y in that belongs to both U1 and U2, right? Then, I mean, by virtue of U1 being a subspace, and when X and Y belongs to U1, X plus Y also belongs to U1, right? I mean, that's the property of the subspace. And the same thing can be said about U2. So that means that X plus Y belongs to U1 and X plus Y also belongs to U2. And so therefore, I mean, by definition of intersection, X plus Y will also belong to U1 intersection U2. The same thing will apply for the scalar multiplication, right? I mean, you take an alpha, right? I mean, you know that alpha X is in U1, right? And alpha X is also in U2. And so therefore, alpha X belongs to U1 intersection. All right. So if that's the case, then I mean, what we actually now want to do is the following: is to see if the following result or the following important result makes sense or not. Which is that U1 and U2 are subspaces, are finite dimensional subspaces, right? Okay. All right. And then this must hold. Okay. Now, a similar result, I mean, structurally similar result you must have encountered in sets, right, where the dimension is replaced by the cardinality, right? Which is you count the number of elements in U1 plus, I mean, so when it comes to sets, this plus is actually declared or defined as a union, right? So when it comes to sets, this is like a union of two sets. The cardinality of the union of two sets is nothing but the cardinality of set 1 plus cardinality of set 2 minus the cardinality of the intersection of those two sets. You have seen a structurally similar result, right? But as far as this is concerned, I mean, how do we approach this? Because these are vector spaces and not just sets. Sets just contain elements, and the state algebra is not extensive enough so that we can extend every set to a vector space, right? A vector space is a set and much more than that. So how do we show that this result holds? We have we have previously, proved the theorem that involves dimension. The rank nullity theorem is nothing but the dimensions of vector spaces and its subspaces, right? And what did we do there?
So we could perhaps stick to the basic definition of what is U1 plus U2 by taking a vector V belong to U1 plus U2 and expressing it in terms of vector in U plus U1 and vector in U2. Some of those.
Okay, but I mean, there is this, you notice this dimension, right? So whenever dimension of a vector space is pops up, whenever the dimension of a vector space is pops up, I mean, what do we essentially know? I mean, what are we essentially trying to say? A dimension means what? When can you compute the dimension of a vector space?
When we know the basis, maybe.
Right? Not maybe, for sure, right? So if it's a finite dimensional vector space, you need to know its basis, right? So if you know the basis, it's a straightforward calculation of its dimension, right? So we need to fix some basis. So you need to show that there is some parity. So there is this left hand side and there is this right hand side, right? Somebody said something else. Okay, yes, all right. So there needs to be some parity between the left hand side and the right hand side, right? In terms of the basis vector, right? So I mean, it is once again a counting exercise, right? So I think so where should we begin? That was my question. We have to fix the basis, but where should we begin?
We could directly construct a basis of U1, U2 and then find what possibly
U1,
could be.
U1, U2 as in the union or the intersection?
No, U1's basis we find what we declare that let U1's basis be this, let U2's basis be this, and then we try to compute that what could possibly be the basis of the sum of these two bases, sum of these two
Right, right.
bases.
Okay, so that could be, I mean, that could be a sort of a heuristic exercise. It might hold, I mean, I'm not sure. But I mean, what I would rather do is that, see, also recall there was an interesting result that we discussed earlier, is that we said that let's say there is a subspace of U is a subspace of V, right? U is a subspace of V, right? And U has a basis. Just recall this, okay? U has a basis, right? So what can we do with this basis of U? U has a basis. So what can we do? Extend this?
So extend it by adding some linearly independent vectors so that we get a diamond, we get the basis for the super space, basically the
V, right? We get, yes, right. So this is an important result. So what I can do is, I mean, this basis can be extended to a basis of V. This is another result that we have seen, right? Okay. Now, if I combine these two results that I wrote on the left-hand side of your screen, right? What do you think? What is your hunch? Where should we start? Which which space or vector space should I consider to begin with? It's pretty obvious, no?
Of the RHS ones.
Hmm?
U1, U2 or their intersection. We could
Not or,
try.
not or, not or. It has to be the intersection, right? Because that's the reason I wrote these two results. Because the intersection of two subspaces is also a subspace, right? And subspace of another vector space, right? So that whatever basis you are, able to define here, whatever basis you are able to define here, you should be able to extend that basis, right? Isn't it? Right? So let's begin here. So this is where we start. Okay. Okay. So that means that let's say that I have a set. So let's say I have a set U1 to UN. I say this to be a basis of U1 intersection U2. Okay. All right. So therefore, clearly, I can write that the dimension of, by this construction, the dimension of U1 intersection U2 is M. Okay. I can also say that this basis can be extended to a basis of U1, okay, as well as a basis of U2. Okay, all right. Why? Because this particular set, right? This particular set is a basis of U1 intersection U2, right? So naturally, this is a linearly independent set, right? So this is a linearly independent set, linearly independent in U1 intersection U2, right? So if I consider just this set, so this particular set is also linearly independent in U1 and U2 separately. Right? It may not be a spanning set. That is different. This particular guy may not span U1 and U2. That's different, right? But at least because by virtue of the definition of the being the basis of U1 intersection U2, it is linearly independent, right? You cannot take away that linear independence from these guys. So these guys are linearly independent in U1 as well as U2. And therefore, this guy, this set U1 to UM, can be extended to a basis of U1 and a basis of U2. Okay, which means that maybe what we can do is we can construct another spanning set in U1. Okay, all right. So this is just a spanning set in U1. We really do not know whether this is a basis of, I mean, whether this is like a linearly independent or not. We don't know yet, right? Okay. or rather, sorry, I'm sorry, we know that. So this is the basis of U1. So therefore, by virtue of this construction itself, the dimension of U1 is what? I think M plus J, and dimension of U2 is M plus K. Okay, all right. So now let's come back to the right hand side. So let's just look at the right hand side. So in the right hand side, I have three things. Okay, I have three things. One is the dimension of U1. Okay, one is the dimension of U1, which I constructed to be as M plus J, right? So the right hand side is M plus J plus the dimension of U2, which is M plus K, minus the dimension of U1 intersection U2, which is by construction M. Okay, all right. So this one M goes away. So what I have is that M plus K plus K. So this is the dimension of the right hand side. Okay. Now, if this particular identity has to be true, what I need to show is that the left hand side, the LHS, is also equal to M plus K plus K. Okay, I need to show this. I don't know this, right? Okay, which means the U1 plus U2 is also a vector space, right? I mean, if U1 and U2 are subspaces and therefore vector spaces of U, then U1 plus U2 is also a vector space. Now, what I need to show is that the dimension of this particular vector space, U1 plus U2, is nothing but M plus J plus K. So, in other words, I need to show that the dimension of U1 plus U2 is equal to M plus J plus K. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's just save this first. All right, so let's see before I start. No. So now we will start from where we left. So this is where we left, right? We know a bunch of stuff. So let's just write this down. We know that dimension of U1 intersection U2 is M. Dimension of U1 is M plus J. Dimension of U2 is M plus K, and need to show that dimension of U1 plus U2 is M plus K plus K. These dimension statements are good enough because if you know the dimensions, you can actually comment about the basis. Okay, so I'm not writing anything. I mean, I'm not rewriting anything about the basis of these individual vector spaces. Okay, all right. Now the question is, how do I show this? Okay. All right. Now the first thing is that are these guys? So what is? So what does this dimension of? What does this particular vector space contain? What is that set of vectors that is contained? It contains this set of vectors, right? V1 through Um, V1 through Vj, and W1 through Wk. This is the spanning set of vectors of U1 plus U2. Right? This is the spanning list of U1 plus U2. Right? Okay. Now, clearly, this particular list contains both U1 and U2, and therefore, this particular list has to contain U1 plus U2 as well. All right. So, what is left to be shown is the following. That what is left to be shown is the following: that this particular list, U1 through Um, V1 through Vk, and W1 through Wk is a linearly dependent set. This is all we need to show. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So this has all come down to this, just to show that this is linearly independent. Right. Now, how do you show that? We recall the definition of linear independence, right? What is linear independence? That you hook up a linear combination of all of these vectors that is equal to 0. And that particular identity has to imply that all of these scalar coefficients has to be 0. Okay. All right. So what I can do is I can write it in the following manner, that we write it this way. Okay. That A1 U1, just set A1 U1 and UN, right? Okay. Plus B1 B1 plus BJ BJ plus P1 W1 plus PK WK. That is equal to, okay. What we need to show is that if we do that, then A1 through AM, B1 through BK, and P1 through PK, they're all equal. Okay. All right. So we need to show this. Okay. All right. Okay. So how do we go about showing that this is true? So this has all come down to this. What is wrong? I did not intend to. This whole thing will be okay. Fine, guys. Just leave with this. Okay. All right. This is one of my fault. So so we'll just have to think about this particular thing. Okay. Now, we have written this, right? So this is just an equation. This is where we begin. So what we can do is the following. I can rewrite this in the following manner. I mean, on the right hand side, you can interpret this as plus one, so minus b1 and b1, right? But I mean, what is the point of writing it this way? Or rather, sorry, I mean, I think what I should have, okay. Right, sorry. I mean, I'll just erase on that previous. This is not what I intended to do. So let me write it in another way. So let me write it as P1 W1 because I wanted to write it in a certain manner to suit my purpose and push everything to the other side. Minus P1 minus KM UN minus B1 V1 minus BK V1. Okay, guys, can you tell me why? I mean, what is the purpose of writing it in this manner? Just think carefully. Look at both sides of the equation and think carefully, and then answer. Don't jump to conclusions. I mean, if you look at the right-hand side carefully, what do you see?
Sir, a vector that belongs to U1 and U1 intersection U2.
That's fine. So it suffices to say that, I mean, so what set of vectors do I have here? U1 through UM and then B1 through BJ, right? Okay, right. So this is the set of vectors that I have here. So I have a linear combination of this set of vectors, right? So U1 through UM and V1 through BJ. Okay. So this is what? What is this set of vectors? This set of vectors is nothing but, I mean, if you look at the left hand side, this set of vectors is nothing but a spanning list. I mean, this is nothing but a basis of U1, right? Okay. So this set of vectors is nothing but a basis of U1. So if this is a basis of U1, a linear combination of these vectors should also belong to U1. Correct? This is a fundamental concept, right? Okay. Now, so the right-hand side vector belongs to U1. Okay. So what do you say about the left-hand side? I mean, naturally, what you can say about the left-hand side is because it's an equation, right? So this means that C1W1 plus CKWK also belongs to U1, isn't it? Right? Okay. Right? Okay. Now, what do I know about? Let's look at this then. What do I know about this set W1 to WK?
They are linearly independent.
No. I mean, yes, they are linearly independent, but I mean, they
It's
also
a part of
the part of part of U2 also, right? If you look at the dimension of U2 is M plus K, right? Which means a part of this M plus K are these vectors, right? W1 through WK. These are part of employees. This is this belongs to U2 also, isn't it? W1 through WK belongs to U2, correct? Right? Okay. So if W1, so that means if W1 through WK belongs to U2, their span should also belongs to U2. Right? So I have two statements here now. One statement is that the C1 W1, the span of W1 to WK belongs to U1 by the construction, right? The way I have written it. Also, I know by definition when you are structuring the vector spaces U1 and U2, I know that W1 through WK is also part of the span of U2, right? Because dimension of U2 is n plus k, and what does U2 contain? U2 contains the vectors U1 through UM and W1 through WK. That is what this means. That is exactly what this means. This particular statement means, right? Okay. So by virtue of that, this set of vectors belongs to W. If this set of vectors belongs to U2, then their linear combination also belongs to U2. All right. So I have this guy belongs to U1. I have this guy belongs to U2. So therefore, what can I say? Clearly, that P1W1, PKW2 belongs to their intersection as well. Correct? Okay? All right? Okay. So if that is the case, then what does that imply? What do we know about U1 intersection U2? What do we know about U1 intersection U2? That don't we know that the dimension of U1 intersection U2 is n, and by construction, don't we know that U1 through UM is a basis of that was already given, right? Okay. Therefore, what? If U1 through UM is a list of vectors, which is a basis of U1 intersection U2, isn't it already a spanning list of U1 intersection U2? Isn't it? Right? And so therefore, if it's already a spanning list of U1 intersection U2, a linear combination of U1 through UM will also belong to U1 intersection U2. Correct? So that means, I mean, I'll just take some combination, right? D1, U1. Okay. All right. And therefore, what I can write is using this statement and this statement, what I can write is P1 W1 plus PK WK. That linear, this is a spanning list that belongs to U1 intersection U2. This is also a spanning list that belongs to U1 intersection U2, and therefore these two must be equal because both of them span the same vector space. Okay, all right. And what this implies is the following, that I have C1 W1 plus PKWK plus minus D1 U1 plus minus DN u1 equal to 0. Okay. Now look at the left hand side carefully. Look at this construction now. So what set of vectors do you see? The set of vectors that you see is u1 through um and w1 through wk, right? Okay. So what is this set of vectors? What do we already know about this set of vectors?
They are linearly independent.
Because they are already a basis of the vector space u2, isn't it? So they are linearly independent. So if they are linearly independent, then what do we know about these scalars? These scalars, C1 through Ck and D1 through Dm, what do we know? 0, right? Come on, guys. This is a linearly independent set of vectors, u1 through um and w1 through wk. This forms the basis of the vector space u2, right? Okay. And since it forms the basis of the vector space u2, this set of vectors u1 through um and w1 through wk has to be linearly independent. So when you set a linear combination of these, all of these vectors to equal to 0, the only conclusion that we can draw about these scalars is that all of these scalars has to be zero, right? Otherwise, this particular statement you cannot write because you already know that these are linearly independent. Most importantly, what this tells us is that C1 through Ck, all of these guys are 0. Okay, all right. Okay, all of these guys are 0. Okay, so that means if that is the case, what do I need to show? I need to show the dimension of u1 plus u2 is n plus j plus k. So what I need to show is that this is a linearly independent set. So I need to show that a1 through an, b1 through bj, and c1 through ck, all of these scalars are 0. So out of these three set of scalars, I have already shown that c1 through ck is equal to 0, right? So what else do I need to show? That these guys are 0. Okay, how do we do that?
So they're linearly independent.
Of course. Why?
They span U1. I mean, the basis for U1.
Correct. Right. They are the basis for U1. Excellent. Right. So these guys, A1 through AM and B1 through BJ, they are the basis of U1 because the dimension of U1 is M plus J, and the spanning set of vectors for the vector space U1 is nothing but U1 through UM and V1 through Vj, right? And therefore they have to be linearly independent, and therefore the scalars have to be they are already linearly independent, right? And all we needed to show is that the extra set of vectors, which is W1 through Wk, are linearly independent. So we have already shown that. So if these are 0, this means that W1 through Wk are linearly independent, right? So if you write a combination, so that means the complete set of vectors, when we write it that way, is linearly independent. Okay, all right. It's really easy to show that you write a linear combination of that set is equal to 0. You already know that those C1s are 0, right? And by virtue of the previous construction, you know that U1 through U1 and V1 through Vj are linearly independent. So the whole set is linearly independent. And therefore, what we needed to show is that the dimension of U1 plus Uj is n plus j plus k is true. That's good. Okay. You got to read this up again, look at the proof, right? I mean, it's sort of difficult to sink in one shot, right? But we are using the same concepts that we have learned, Remember, we are using the concepts of linear independence. We are using the concepts of spanning list, basis, dimension. That's what we are doing. We are not doing anything else. Okay, all right. Showing this in terms of matrices is, extremely, tedious and painful, right? So that's why these proofs are much more elegant. Okay. All right. And this is an important result because using this you can easily figure out, dimensions of subspaces of different subspaces and so on. Okay. So continuing with this discussion, let me now go to the another interesting application. So since we are talking about basis, so we'll continue talking about basis, right? And we'll continue about a very interesting thing that we do sometimes, in fact, a lot of times, right, without realizing. And in fact, the plenty of examples that we have seen in the class so far are actually the examples of change of basis. So for someone who hasn't done this, right? If I ask you, what do you think a change of basis is? Just by the wording of it. I'll have to find an example. Let me find that. Yes. Guys, what do you think a change of basis is? No clue? No clue? Really? Okay. This is surprising because you guys are really sharp. So let's just consider R2. Okay. So let's say I have a transformation that goes from R2 to R2. Okay. What is the standard basis in R2? What is the most?
E1 and E2.
Right. So 1, 0, 0, 1. Is this the only basis in R2?
No.
No. So there could be other bases as well, right? Okay, good. So now, using this, using whatever you told me, so let's consider a transformation from V to V, right? Just considering just isometric transformation. So I can have one basis, B, in V. I can have another basis, B hash, in V, right? So these are two different bases, okay? These are two different bases. The question is, can there be a relation found in these two bases, B and B prime or B hash? In other words, what I want to ask is that matrix, is there a matrix induced by a linear transformation, E, right? We can call this, okay? Okay. What do you think? Is this possible? Yes, it is. And you have actually seen plenty of examples of this in the class. Nothing comes to mind? Nothing flashes back? No? Seriously? Okay. I mean, both of these are vectors. Come on. So these rotation, reflection, these things are not change of basis? You don't think so?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right? Okay. What other examples do you think we actually have come across in class without explicitly saying so? So this is one example of a change of basis. Okay. Give me another example. I mean, before showing you how to do a change of basis, I wanted to tell you what is the why, what is the reason of why do we change this? I mean, why would you do something like this, right? Okay. Any other example of a change of basis? So guys,
The
change of basis.
eigenvectors, we could make them as the basis as they want.
Correct. If the eigenvectors, yeah, particularly for some very specific linear transformations, you know, if the eigenvectors are form an orthogonal, if there is an orthogonal set of eigenvectors, so naturally they become linearly independent, right? The moment eigenvectors become linearly independent, the matrix that you have formed using the eigenvectors becomes a full rank matrix, right? Okay, correct. And so therefore it becomes invertible, right? And so therefore the original matrix can be represented in terms of the new eigenvector matrix and an eigenvalue matrix, isn't it? We have seen such an example, right? So let's say, I mean, the moment I write it, it will come back to you and like, you have seen this. I have shown this particular transformation many times, right? Where G is a diagonal matrix containing the eigenvalues of A, and what is P? P is a matrix that contains the eigenvectors, right? So when you construct a matrix containing the eigenvectors of A, the original basis of A and the basis of P are not the same, right? So what you have done essentially by virtue of this transformation, you have essentially done a change of basis, right? And there are immense practical applications of this. One is exponentiating a matrix becomes easier. The other application is actually solving a system of coupled differential equations, okay, which are extremely useful in many physical and engineering problems. Okay, let me write down all the examples first, one by one, before I come back to this. So there is another example, which is PCA. PCA is also a change of basis example because, I mean, when you ultimately get your principal components, right, those principal components are actually linear combinations of the existing, earlier basis, right? So when you look at the principal component 1 and principal component 2, those are nothing but, linear combinations of the basis vectors of the previous matrix, which you have transformed into a new matrix, right? Okay. So this here is one example of change of basis. Singular value decomposition is another example of change of basis, right? And so on and so forth. There are plenty of such change of basis applications. Okay. All right. Now, in fact, there are other practical problems as well. Plenty. In fact, in quantum mechanics, this change of basis is used left and right. Is there any physics major in this class? Computer science and physics?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Ah, Sanjay, good. So you have taken a class on quantum mechanics yet or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you are familiar with quaternions?
Sir, no, we didn't use quaternions.
You're familiar with spin matrices and all that?
So what matrices?
Spin.
Spin. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, right. So, as a simple problem of general interest to anybody who has a scientific mind is that, if I have a cube, right? How do I know? How to easily find out whether a particular point is inside the cube, right? And that particular point is not visible. The angle of view, your angle of view is such that, or the cube is sort of aligned in such a way that you really do not know whether that point, you can't see the point, right? So when you have such a situation, what do? It's a general question. You change the geometric orientation of the cube, right? Correct? How would you change the geometric orientation of the cube? You will rotate, reflect, do a bunch of linear transformations, right? Correct? So whenever you do that, you are actually affecting a change of basis. Okay. Now, what you want to do is to bring the cube to a favorable position so that you can see the point. And the most favorable position of a cube is when its axes are actually orthogonal or parallel to the coordinate axis, right? That's the most favorable position. So any cube, any initial orientation of that cube which is not like that, in order to bring it to the orientation that I just mentioned, you need to do a change of basis operation, right? And so therefore there are plenty such change of basis applications. So change of basis actually is a very, very useful application in linear algebra and other places, right? And the way it is done is by a simple linear transformation. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay, all right. So I will begin by working out an example, right? But before working out an example, I just wanted to give you a practical perspective of why we do change of basis. Otherwise, it will just be solving one numerical example. Okay. So let's say I have, my vector space is R3. I have one vector space which is R3, right? And I consider a basis alpha as alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. I do not have the time to finish the problem. Given by, and this is given by alpha 1 is E1 plus E3. You know what E1 and E3 are, right? These are standard basis. Alpha 2 is E2 plus E3. And alpha 3 is E. Okay, all right. Now I have a transformation which takes me from R3 to R2. Okay, all right. And the transformation is defined in this manner. The linear transformation is defined in this manner. That T alpha 1 is beta 1. T alpha 2 is beta 2. And T alpha 3 is beta 1 plus beta 2 divided by 2. Okay, where the beta 1, beta 2 are nothing but standard basis in R2. Okay, all right. Now what I want to show, I want to show a bunch of things the first thing that I want to show that if I define a new transformation of basis, a new change of basis, like I want to show that, let's say I define something like this, E1 minus E3. This would be E1 minus E2 actually. And there's a typo, and gamma 3 is E3. Let me check one. So, yeah, right. 1 minus E2, right? Okay. So what my claim is this defines a new basis in R3. Okay, all right. And also, if it does, then your gamma 1, gamma 2, gamma 3, this write in terms of, you should be able to write this in terms of alpha, which is nothing but alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha. This is just a toy example where it shows how to play around with the basis vectors. Okay, all right. So I don't have the time to finish the problem, but I mean, at least what I can tell you is that you can rewrite from the original definition of these alphas. You can, if you want, you can express the standard basis vectors in terms of alpha, and that is something that we have to do, right? So I mean, I think a quick observation, if I take the difference of alpha 1 minus alpha 2, what do I get? No, I get E1 minus E2, right? Okay, that is fine. Okay, so that does not work. So let me take the difference of alpha 1 minus alpha 3. If I take the difference of alpha 1 minus alpha 3, I get E1. Okay. If I take the difference of alpha 2 minus alpha 3, okay, E2, right? Okay. And if I use these two, okay, and I also know that alpha 3 equal to E3, this is E1. So this is an easy way of, writing the standard basis vectors in terms of alpha. Okay, all right. And then I have to show that this defines a basis, which means I have to show that this gamma 1, gamma 2, gamma 3 is a spanning set as well as linearly independent. Showing spanning set is easy. Showing linear independence is also not a big deal. Okay. However, writing this in terms of alpha is because the gammas are not written directly in terms of alpha. So we have to use a transformation matrix to do the trick. Okay. So that's something that we will do it in the next class. Okay. All right. So let me take this. We'll start with this in the next class, and then I'll show you one example from the intersection theorem that we just proved, right? And then we'll move on. Okay. All right, guys. See you next class. And did you get back your grades from the first test? I think you should, right? You did not. Okay, fine.
Sir?
Did you get back your grades from the first test? You should have gotten back your grades, right? Because it is auto-graded anyway.
You're talking about like the T1 test, right?
T1, yeah.
Yeah, like there was marks like shown right after you completed the test.
Exactly, right. Okay, good.
Sir,
Okay.
one question regarding that.
Mm-hmm.
So like there was a question where it said like these two matrices with real
I know.
elements.
See, I actually announced in the beginning of the class. So for unclear wording or imprecise wording, if you were confused, right, I have taken care of it. So, I mean, whatever grades Google show you, don't worry about that. Okay. So I have converted the grades into a offline Excel sheet, and I have changed the grades accordingly. So I did not penalize any student.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Because
I just want to understand like what change it is. So like which question is the change in?
that was question number 5, right?
Yeah, so is that the only question or like
I think so. Yes. That's the only
question?
question. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, guys. See you next class.